You know, often when we talk about emotions, we talk about positive and negative emotions. Well, what if emotions are just emotions? Today we're going to talk about how to manage our emotions in a positive way. So what are emotions? And are emotions good or are they bad? Is there such a thing as positive and negative emotions? The truth is, everything in this world is made up of energy. Everything. So emotions are just energy, and different emotions are different levels of vibration of that energy. So emotions aren't good or bad, they just are. But it's what we do with those emotions that determines whether it's working for us or it's not working for us. So if you remember, we've talked in other videos that emotions are a result of our thoughts. I'll put the equation up here again real quick. But we have events or circumstances. Oftentimes they're called triggers or antecedents. And so we have an antecedent, an event that happens, and then we have a thought about that event, and the thought then determines our emotion. So where do our emotions come from? Our emotions come from our thoughts. So who is in control of our emotions? Well, we are in control of our emotions. But here's something to think about and to consider. Have you ever done anything without thinking about it? Have you ever done anything for no reason? We have another video that talks about why we do the things that we do. And in that we talk about that in our life, about 90% of our day, we're acting on autopilot, which means it's the subconscious part of our brain that's driving our behavior. So just as there are physical responses that we have in life, for example, when you're driving a car, do you have to think about all of the steps in driving a car? If you drive a stick shift and you've been doing that for a period of time, do you have to consciously think about how to shift, upshift, downshift, or do you just do it? Other examples are, brushing your teeth. Do you have to think about how to brush your teeth? Do you have to think about how to get dressed in the morning? No, those are just things that we've done over and over and over again, and the subconscious just takes care of them. Well, what about emotions? Could it be that we get conditioned in our life to respond emotionally, to have certain thoughts about things that happen, and that just occurs in the subconscious part of our brain. So we're not even aware of it. So it would appear like, or appear as, the antecedent is actually creating the emotion. So somebody says something to me that is mean, and automatically I have an emotion of feeling sad. So it appears as if that statement causes the emotion, but in truth, I've got a thought about that statement that is creating the emotion. But maybe it's been conditioned over time. It's happened so many times that I'm not even aware of it, and it's occurring in the subconscious. I'll give you kind of a silly example of how this happens in life. So let's say I'm a little boy. I'm about 4 years old, and we have a rule in our house that it's okay to play with toys out in the living room, but when you're done with something, you put it back before you bring a new toy out. Well, I've been playing in the living room for a couple of hours, and I have not followed the rule, and so I have toys scattered all over the living room. And my dad comes home from work, and he walks through the door, and he sees the toys everywhere. So he looks down at me, and I'm this small kid, I'm looking up at my dad, and he's upset. And I can feel it in the tone of his voice. He raises his voice a little bit, maybe even yells at me, and he says, Randy, what are you doing? You know what the rule is. You're not supposed to make a mess in the living room. Come here. And I go over to him and I look up at him, and as he's kind of yelling at me, I have this sensation come over my body. I don't like how it feels, and I don't really know how to respond to my dad because I've never been in that situation before. But he's looking down at me, he's kind of yelling at me, and so I decide to yell back at him. So I yell back at my dad, and now he gets more upset. He reaches down, he grabs me, he swats me on the rear end, and he sends me to my room. So I go off to my room. You know, my rear end is a little bit sore, and now I have to spend the rest of the evening isolated from my family, and I don't really enjoy that. So the next day, let's say the exact same thing happens. I'm out playing with my toys. My dad comes home from work. He gets upset at me again. He raises his voice. He starts, yelling at me. I have that same feeling, that same sensation come over me. Again, I don't know what to do, but I decide to yell at my dad again. And I get the same response. He spanks me and he sends me to my room. So 2 times now this has happened, and I don't like that. I don't like the outcome. So now let's say the next day the same thing happens. My dad comes home from work. I'm a slow learner. I've got toys all over, so I've been playing again. My dad gets upset, starts yelling at me. I have those same feelings come over me. I don't know what to do, and I go to start to yell at him, but then I have that thought that, wait a minute, I yelled at my dad yesterday and the day before. I got spanked when I did that, and I got sent to my room. I don't want that to happen today. So I'm standing there trying to figure out what to do, and so he kneels down. He calls me over to him, he gives me a hug, hands me a piece of candy, and sends me on my way. Now that's a lot better response than getting spanked and sent to my room. So now let's say the next day the same thing happens. My dad comes home, I've got a mess everywhere, he starts yelling at me. Again, this time I start tearing up and I start crying. My dad again gives me a hug, gives me a piece of candy, and sends me on my way. So which behavior am I going to continue to do? The one that is working for me, I get a hug and a piece of candy, versus a swat on the rear end and getting sent to my room. All of that can begin to go into my subconscious. And let's say that this pattern basically repeats itself. That anytime my dad gets upset at me and I start crying or tear up, he feels bad about that. And so he rewards me in a certain way for crying. Now let's say a year or 2 passes and I start school. And so I'm in kindergarten and I've been at school for a few weeks and I'm enjoying school. But one day the class kind of gets out of hand and the teacher gets upset, raises her voice, and kind of gets after the class. And when the teacher does that, I have that same feeling, that same sensation come over me as when my dad raises his voice. Well, what do you think I'm going to do? If I'm on autopilot in the subconscious part of my brain, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to be in that situation. I'm going to hear the words. I'm going to feel the feeling, and I'm going to start crying. So let's say I start to tear up in class. The teacher notices me tearing up, and so after she gets after the class, she sends everybody out to recess, but she says, Randy, will you stay in the class for a minute? So I hang around, and she calls me up to her desk afterwards, and she says, Randy, I apologize. I didn't mean to get upset at the class like that, and I'm sorry that I upset you. And so she apologizes to me, and she's got a stash of candy in her desk, and she hands me a piece of candy. Well, her response then to my crying, does that weaken my behavior or strengthen my behavior? So it strengthens it. And again, that's all happening without me being consciously aware of that. I'm not thinking in my head, oh, whenever I cry, this happens. It's just occurred and reinforced that behavior. Well, let's say that basically throughout my life, that every time I start crying, I get reinforced for that behavior. I graduate high school, I go out and I get my first real job. And I like my job, but one day my boss comes into my office and he just starts yelling at me. He lets me have it. What am I going to do? Well, again, if I've been conditioned throughout my life and I'm on autopilot, I'm going to start crying. And if my boss looks at me and says, Randy, what are you doing? I don't like crying. I don't even like emotion. Just do your job or you're not going to have a job. And then he leaves and I'm going, whoa, that's not the response that I expected. Well, let's say about 3 months goes by and my boss gets upset at me and he comes in and he starts yelling at me again. What am I going to do? If I've been conditioned throughout my life and I'm on autopilot, I'm going to start crying again. So let's say I start crying, my boss gets after me again. He says, look, if you keep doing this, you're not even going to have a job. So he leaves, 6 months passes, he gets mad at me again. I feel the emotions start to rise and I'm about ready to cry. And then I have a thought, wait a minute, I really like my job. If I cry, I may lose my job and I don't want to lose my job. So I just suck it up. I listen to my boss, I say, okay, and he leaves. So again, we have to know that emotions serve a purpose. It's because of the outcome that it creates for us. So if we don't like the outcome that we're getting in our life, we need to go back to our thoughts and find the error that's in our thoughts or our beliefs about that situation or circumstance. And as we change our thoughts, our emotions will change. And we can go from sadness to where we can turn it into happiness. We can go from anger, we can turn that into happiness, or we can turn it into excitement or curiosity or peace. We can choose to experience any emotion that we want to if we will just take control of our thoughts. So what did you think about today's video? I'm interested in knowing how it's helping you, or if there are things that are not making sense that you don't understand. Go ahead and comment below and let's make this a discussion that we can all learn and grow from.